Hundred Hands is a non-profit organization which encourages rural and traditional artists and urban artists to showcase their work and to all the people those who are interested. They even have a yearly event that happens as a handmade collective at the end of the year. And I know a lot of people attend that event, and it's one of the most successful events of Bangalore. So without much, without I much talking, let me just hand it over to Mala. So Mala, can you give us a brief introduction of what you do and why you started?
It was primarily set up by Sonia, my sister, and myself to bring back handmade, so at many levels. It was one is obviously, just in.
Okay. So when did you start? When did you start? And when this idea,
10 years. We've just
idea about come?
Just finished 10 years back. 10 years.
Okay. And when you had this idea, did you immediately go around saying that, okay, I'm going to start something like this and then make it into an event? And what are your plans? As in, did you?
It just started as a fun. It started as a fun little bazaar in our garden. We were helping the women farmer group, some Malnar. And, there was some interesting work, and it was just family and friends in our garden. That's it. And it just kind of grew because more and more groups contacted us. So it's now moved beyond the bazaar to, a year-long program to try and help members of 100 Hands to actually be more, to get known and to be more confident, I would say, in many ways.
Okay. So then, did you face any challenges per se? Because after all, it's handmade, right? There's a lot of, especially for the rural artists, there are a lot of middlemen in there. So
I think there
are a lot of challenges breaking that entire route, because traditional artists won't as such be very comfortable. Suddenly someone comes up and says, chalo, join the member, become a member, and you can start selling or you can start showcasing your work. So did you have problems there?
So actually we were quite lucky, because right from the beginning we said no middleman. So we were approached by a couple of the rural, I'm talking about here, rural artisans who had contacted us through the little program that we had in our garden, and word of mouth spread, in that sense. So if you look at all the members that come in today, it's also a lot of it is word of mouth, rural artisans. And I think suddenly the world opened up for them. And I think that's the main contribution that an organization like 100 Hands has made, where suddenly you feel that there is pressure on you, obviously, to design better and to be able to present better. But it's also that the entire money that you're giving to, the customers paying is coming correctly into your pocket. So I think that was I think that really is what our core focus is.
Okay. And did you have any problems with middlemen coming in and saying that how can you,
we've had some middlemen in the sense of who have tried to kind of slip in as artisans, but because our selection process is quite stringent, and also, the community of crafts people advise us as well. Many members advise us on whether this is a genuine artisan or not. I think we've been able to weed out. We definitely take on some designers as members, but designers who are focusing on a particular craft, and also that we're absolutely sure there is a fair wage program going on with them. So that's a few members, but the focus primarily is direct artisans or artists. It could be urban, could be rural. Anyone who's actually creating by themselves.
Okay. So do you have a criteria? Do you have a set of, like a questionnaire or something? This for the interest of people, because a lot of people after I said, okay, I'm getting Mala in, so they were like, okay, what type of a membership is it, and what is the criteria?
Membership is quite stringent. It's also unfortunately restricted to, we're a very small team. As you know, we're a 2-member team. So it's tough I mean, I wish we could have more members. I wish we could have lots and lots and lots of, thousands and thousands of members. Because of our bandwidth, we can't have more than about 100, 150 members. But they're all genuine craftspeople. And I think once we look at maybe the year going ahead, maybe setting up chapters in different cities, then people themselves, the artisans themselves should be able to run it, with our guidance and our framework. So that I think it's nice when people come to a stage where they don't need us to do any more hand holding. They should have that confidence that, fine, it's been a stepping stone, it's been a diving board, but now we've gone off on our own. We don't need to constantly be proprietary about our craftspeople. So coming back to the membership, I know many people apply and don't get selected for membership. And there's a lot of angst because of that as well. The problem is that every year we change the focus as well, on who should be a member. 3 criteria critically: that definitely someone who's got very high quality of skill should be a member. Somebody who's willing to innovate and someone who has the mindset to be able to innovate. And third, that they want to build their own brands. And I think that's where our expertise comes in, or our own strength comes in, where we can help the artisan to build his own brand, and therefore is not at the mercy of the middleman. I mean, he can choose to go through a middleman, that's fine, but it's not at the mercy of the middleman.
Yeah, got it. Yes, yeah, but I think that's the way you should move forward also, because otherwise it becomes very difficult for artists to actually sustain themselves in the long run.
I think the value lies in the brand, right? Why do you pay a premium for a particular brand? And when an artisan feels that, I just got a call from one of our members 2 days ago, very upset because some of his designs were used by somebody else and promoted, and there was an article on how those people were reviving the craft. So he rang me up, he said, Madam, you please help me to build my brand. So we are going through that whole process. So I think it's important that you understand the brand is not about a logo or not about, just the cosmetics, but what really is the focus.
What the brand brings out to the entire thing,
what the brand means, so that there's a reason why I would buy a Risham jewelry versus another jewelry. What is that difference is what we have to understand.
Got it. Yes, that's nice. Yeah. So now that so now post COVID, the entire COVID thing that has come into the picture, and so we are off for almost 2 months now. We have not been doing anything. How has it affected? How do you think that it has affected the rural artists? Probably the urban artists can still, survive and can still think that, okay, we can manage. But for a rural artist, it's very important. Even that single month matters a lot. So how do you think this is going to affect them? What can they do?
Certainly it's affected. I mean, there's no question about it. People who actually, once the season, the end of the season is really February, and the next season really starts in July. So it is a low time as far as sales go. I'm talking about individual sales or exhibitions. It's a good time for the artisans to actually look at product development, look at design, look at how they can go forward in the new post-COVID world, because as craft will be the lowest priority on many people.
Exactly.
Also, I think to understand pricing, because right now people are going to be very, very conscious of pricing. So for them to also look at many of their processes and understand how to keep costs down smartly. I think people who have got their raw material, many of them who are working from home, I think are quite safe. But there are a large amount who actually, live literally day to day, and rations are a big issue. And I think there are many groups who are doing petitions with the government as well to be able to identify these people and for them to get government help. But for people who are safe as far as the food and you're at home, part of it, I would urge them very strongly to look at development of design and innovation. Spend time thinking, talk to us, brainstorm, look around you, and be prepared for the period going forward in terms of pricing. And I think our mission of actually eliminating the middleman will actually help. I wish we could help a lot more people than what we are doing currently.
Okay. So we have a question here.
Yeah.
In the post-COVID world, where a lot of transactions might move online, how will you help build artisanal brands? So because now
I think that's an excellent point. I think online is definitely one of the channels. I wouldn't say it's the only channel, but it's certainly a channel that needs to be explored. What we're doing for our rural members is certainly setting up Instagram, Facebook accounts, websites for them, and helping them to be independent. But I think also if we are able to get some technical funding, I think definitely setting up an online platform actually to be able to showcase our artists better online, I think will definitely be a way to go.
Yeah, because online, I think, especially in a scenario like this, I think online works really well. But I think the challenge you face is because rural artists are not necessarily technically sound, so they might have trouble, understanding the entire process of online buying, selling. How do you sell on an online platform? So I think there might be a lot
organizations, yeah. I think organizations like ours and larger organizations who are artisan support organizations need to very clearly handhold artisans to be able to be independent and to be able to work online. They need to be online. They need to. There is the next generation.
Yeah, do you think there will be some sort of resistance from the rural artists to go online?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's only a question of getting for them to know how to do it. So I don't think there's any resistance. The next generation of artisans who are, in their 20s, 30s, they're very, very savvy with their smartphones. And it would be great if all the artisans could be, as part of the whole program, be given a smartphone and told how to use it and to be able to sell online. I think that could be great. But many of them do have. And I think if they're on Facebook, and there's no reason why they can't sell. But I think they need to be trained, not only rural artisans, but I think urban artisans as well need to be trained. So Lisa, you should be holding training programs for rural artisans and teaching them how to do that. I think it would be great. We may rope you in. As a 100-hand member, we shall rope you in.
Yeah, absolutely. We should do that. We should try. Yeah, there's nothing wrong in trying and helping. It's a good thing because at least you get the opportunity, and I think it gives us some sense of satisfaction also that at least you're trying to help them out and make them set up in.
I think if every urban artist can adopt one rural artist to help them with online, then I think it's a good way to go.
I know, absolutely. That's a nice idea. Yes, we'll definitely do that. So we have one more question. Hi, Mala. Do you think you'll be able to have some new artists this year, urban as well as rural? So yeah, this I think question on how do you get new artists? Do you do this yearly or?
We have a 200-300 waiting list. So getting new artists definitely is something that we should look at. Also, I think whether we'll have an exhibition, I don't know. Given the scenario, we really don't know. We can't say. Also, I think if people feel that there is the same artist, sometimes that is repeated in the exhibitions, it's only because there's a certain amount of hand holding that happens for the artists to reach a certain level where they don't need us anymore, you know. So, but
So do you see
definitely,
so do you see many members? Is there a churning of members? As in, members go out, members come in, members are
there
moving
should
out.
be.
So
Yeah, there should be actually. I mean, we keep telling the older members you need to give way to new members, but you know, many of them don't want to leave the membership. So we're looking at larger form. We don't know really. Any suggestions for us are most welcome.
okay, yeah. Okay, the next, I think one more question I have. So generally in
Yeah.
the handmade market, when you see it, it's a very touch and feel kind of a thing. So people buy, especially from a rural artist or especially from an urban, basically any artist, when they can see the product, where they can talk to you, when they converse with you, understand some bit of the history, what you do, how you do it, what people are doing. So that it's like an emotional connect, between two parties. But
Yeah.
the moment you digitize the entire thing, so
Yeah.
how do you think people are going to, relate to that? How do you think people are going to change that outlook, and how do you think that is going to work out?
Mm, I mean, what you said is absolutely right. Um, I don't think that online can replace the sense of the personal touch, really, you know, of an artisan talking passionately about his work, or you know, like you said, the touch and feel. I don't think it can be replaced, but I think we need to look at online as a medium, really, you know, look at it as one medium to be able to reach out. But it's not either or. I think a combination will work. It's definitely not either or.
Yeah, because that's what I have noticed, especially in the online world, to build a connection takes you longer. Whereas in a physical world, there's an instant
Yeah.
connection. As in, you meet that person, you
Yeah,
talk to that person,
absolutely. And you know,
right?
because we don't, the members of Hundred Hands are the artisans directly. I think you know, the passion in which the interaction. It's a very strong interaction that happens, and it goes far beyond a buy and sell. You know, it's
Right.
about a personal touch. People get to know people personally. There is a sense of warmth that comes through. You understand the trials and tribulations that you've gone through actually to be able to create something. So it's not, you know, the personal human touch, I think, is important to understand the process. We can, you know, keep doing videos and we can keep using online, but it's not
Absolutely. Yes.
the only
Yeah.
medium. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
You know, once
And
you've
also,
established to sell more, it's fine. You can use online. But I think establishing in a certain market, I think a personal touch makes a very big difference.
yeah, also I've noticed, especially in 100 Hands, so when you keep coming back every year, people notice you and people know you. Okay, I have seen you, the previous year, I've seen you the 2 years back. And I
Yeah,
think they come back for you. And
yeah,
they come back, they search for you, they say, okay, we have bought from you this time. And so that kind of I think, connection is there, especially with 100 Hands, I have noticed that. And I noticed that a lot of people have also told me that, if you come back, you keep coming back multiple years, then people know
yeah.
you and then they buy from you. So that connection, I think, physical world does give you that. So we have one more suggestion from Ara by Dina. Maybe it would be good to have a limited time membership, 3 to 5 years. What do you
Yeah,
think of this
I
suggestion?
think, yeah, Dina, that's a good suggestion. Um, I think we'll rope you into the selection process of the membership to find out what an uphill task it is, because you know, I mean, it's really tough to say no to a member, but the criteria is, yeah, but it has to be a limited membership. You're right, absolutely.
So, but then I just something came up to your mind. If it's take for example, your 100 hands is for you're hand holding the artist to move to a certain level. Now, assuming that the artist has not yet moved to a level that you, within the 3 to 5 years, they have not yet moved to that level that they can go on their own and say, okay, we can manage on their own. So at that point, I'm sure the artist will resist, or there will be certain amount of resistance saying that we still need 100 hands. Because whatever
Uh,
said and done, 100 hands is a very good organization. It's a very good event also for a lot of people. So
I think the challenge really is sales in many ways, because they do a lot of sales at the 100 Hands program, and it's commission free. So many people, 30 or 40% of their annual sales actually comes from the 100 Hands platforms. So they are dependent on it. So it's a tough call for us to say no to somebody.
yeah, and it's
But I
think a
think
lot
we
of
have to
members,
spend.
yeah, because they depend on that, one event or two events that happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we do, we definitely give priority to people who are innovative, because the event per se is, we keep the customer in mind. So someone who's innovating, someone who's actually part of that community of helping out the other artisans, I think, they get priority definitely.
Yeah. So you mentioned innovation. So how do you tell the artist that you need to innovate? Innovate in which way? Do you give them a theme? Do you give them some ideas, or because obviously any artist or any product has its own restrictions around what they can do. So how do you decide on something that
Yeah, we work on a theme. There is a theme for the year, and we have to push the artisan. At least 30 or 40% of his product is with that theme. It's been an uphill task, but I think it's been great that how the artists have come together and to be able to work towards a theme. I think that's been very, very satisfying. I would say our most successful theme has been the Me to We, which has been where two artists collaborate. And I think probably we'll bring that back definitely, and get more people to work together to be able to create. Because then it's
examples for our audience as to how the Me to Be worked, or how somebody.
I don't know whether Madhu Mehra is still online right now, but I think her bringing in Ajrak into her neck warmers was a great success. We had Abdul, who was working with the Bagru printer, so he had daris that were indigo dyed. So like that, there were many interesting, very, very interesting collaborations. And I think that becomes a product that can command a premium. You can certainly, innovate. It's unique. Nobody can copy it in a way. So I think once that is kind of established, the theme works very well. Actually,
yeah,
but it's a long process.
It gives you ideas too. Yeah.
Pardon?
No, I said that.
Sorry,
it gives you ideas on how to innovate and what new to come up with. It gives you a direction, sort of thing.
It gives you direction. It's also, if the membership is based on that, you see a lot of innovation. Because if they have,
it pushes you.
we push very hard. We push very hard.
So Madhu auntie is here, and she says my best product so far was the Ajrak client neck warmer. Yes, absolutely it was. I have one or two of them, and I do use them. And I gave them to my dad also.
I think I have to thank Madhu to really have set the trend of jumping into with that theme. It was great.
I know, absolutely. So okay, there is so one more question is there's a lot of buzzword about about sustainability and how products have to be sustainable. So do you think handmade as such is sustainable? Do you think a handmade product can be considered sustainable? Are the processes that are involved by making the handmade, are they sustainable? So the entire thing. So what are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by sustainable?
So sustainable is when you know who the artists are, whether the products are being made properly, the people who are making it are in good conditions, there are fair wages, that sort of a thing.
Well, it's definitely, I mean, fair wages.
You're not using raw materials which are bad for the entire You see, it's not bad for the universe. It's not bad for the planet. Those
I
kind of things.
think the word is gentle to the earth, gentle to the earth, and I certainly feel that handmade is gentle to the earth, and I think certainly. I mean, as
But
far as the artist,
how do you convince the artist that you have to be the processes that you use should be sustainable. You're not using like, especially when you're making clothing or something like that.
when it's when it's not mass produced, when it's not mass
Yes, you can get it.
Yeah, when it's not mass produced, there is a whole small is beautiful in that sense. So it is definitely a more, sustainable, process and product. I mean, handmade. However, there are, questions about the kind of chemicals and the dyes that are used.
Yes.
So, and it's always a toss up, between, what is commercially viable and what is not. So I think if something that is, more sustainable in that sense of, eco-friendly or gentle to the earth can be priced at a price point that is able to get enough sales, I think that will be the essence. Handmade doesn't have to be highly priced and over the top fashionable, and I think it has to be fair priced. I think even the artisans need to understand that as well.
Right.
And because we have no middleman,
because
sales are direct, I think, that's our little bit that we're trying to do as well.
yes. And also, I think handmade, for that matter, one not highly priced. Also, the quality also has to be maintained because sometimes I feel that, especially in handmade, you get a lot of shoddy products, as in the quality is not that great and not very nicely made. But in the name of handmade, a lot of things get sold. Just because it is handmade, it doesn't necessarily have to be not nice or not good quality.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, there is no excuse for bad quality. You can have, I mean, the beauty is the variation that is there in handmade, but that doesn't mean that you can do some shoddy stuff and palm it off as bad quality stuff just because it's handmade. I mean, I think because certainly our membership program, the quality of the product is, there's no question about it. You can't become a member if you're going to have shoddy stuff.
Absolutely.
So it's like someone wants to build an eco-friendly home. There's no reason why the lintel has to be teda, I'm just saying those are basic things. I mean, why in the name of ethnic, why should something be shoddy? No excuse, absolutely.
Right. Okay, we have one question here. Okay, before the question, I think Madhu Aunty has said, wish 100 Hands a smaller exhibition. 5 days has become too much for this old lady. Aunty, you're not an old lady. I'm sure of that. You have a lot more, enthusiasm and energy. More than any of us.
Who has now become a household name in her knitting, in She Who Knits. So she doesn't need exhibitions anymore.
I know. So we have one more question. I'm not sure if this has been asked yet. What kind of support or encouragement do makers of handmade products get from central or state governments under the Make in India program?
That's a very good question, and there are a lot of schemes that are there from the government. We don't get any government funding. It's an uphill task for us. So I'm not very sure specifically what the Make in India direct support to artisans is. But there are a lot of schemes, and I think if there, the government exhibitions are there and the government support should be there if you have an artisan card.
What is an artisan card? So does everybody get it, or is there a criteria for it, or how does it apply? I think the connection is just.
I think the connection just got cut off. Let's just wait for a few seconds. She'll join in. You guys have any other questions? Please drop your questions, and I'm sure she'll be ready to answer. So how are you guys? So criteria for 100 hands. I think Chanchal, I think she just answered that question. According to her, there are a lot of I think they see who they want to, whether they're individual artists or designers, and she did mention that the number of designers are limited. Who they want to take up designers, they prefer individual artists or direct artisans for that, and so that is one of their criteria. Probably you can ask her again. And they do have a yearly program wherein yearly they do change, but I think they're coming up with something wherein they're going to churn the membership. So every 3 to 5 years, or that was a suggestion that churn the membership so that new members can join in and old members can move out, and once they are done with how much they can take from 100 hands. So Sarah 85 Mary, where can we get good quality beads in India? That's a I don't think you will get very good quality of beads. As in, if you are saying that whether you get good beads which are manufactured in India. No, India does not have good beads, does not produce good beads. But you do get. There's a brand called Preciosa that is available in India. So you can search for Preciosa beads. They are not the best, but for your trials and for learning, that will do perfectly. So yes, you can go ahead and buy the Preciosa beads. I personally use the Japanese brands. They are just perfect. So I think that works for me. But yes, Preciosa works. Okay. Do Indian artisans tap the overseas market? So the artisans around here in this conversation, please let us know. Do Indian artisans tap? So I think from what I understand, the overseas market is very tricky. It is difficult to reach out to the overseas market because we do not know what works there, what's the culture, what type of products are getting sold there. So unless you have somebody there who is handling the things around there, who's handling your marketing, who's handling your sales, it becomes very difficult for an individual artist to actually go and sell there. And I'm sure they have a lot of licenses also. So, but I know a lot of people who actually collaborate with somebody there, probably a store there or somebody who is doing this kind of, who has a setup there. They collaborate with them and try and sell there. I don't know about any other way of doing it. Thanks, Sarah. How are Japanese beads better than other kinds? Japanese beads
are a lot
better. They are very consistent, and the quality is a lot better. They are precise in the way they are sized. Each bead is almost of the same size, so you don't have to worry
about anything going bad.
So I think, and the colors stay. They don't spoil, or they have a longer lifespan than the others. So that is, I think, more about it being consistent in size and color. When you're actually doing a weave, it's very important that it stays the same, and so that a pattern actually forms. If there are inconsistencies, you can easily make out that it is inconsistent, and the pattern just doesn't come out. So I think what Mala says is she's not able to join back. So let's bring an end to this conversation. And if you guys have any questions, or you want to talk more about handmade and have any other discussions, do let us know. If you want anybody, if you want us to, okay, hold on. Let us see if she can join.
Actually, the connection is really slow here for some reason. But so, any other questions? I'm happy to answer on chat or anything else.
Yeah. So there was one more question of how do Indian artists sell overseas, in the overseas market? Does 100 Hands help, or how easy or difficult it is? Especially, let's talk about rural artists, because I think
they need to have an export license. They need to get an export license. It's not difficult to get an export license, and you need to explore the market abroad. As you know, 100 Hands doesn't sell on behalf of anyone, so we don't actually sell. But there are other groups who. The starting point is to get that export license. Once you're able to get that, then you can start exploring the market and looking at, and maybe in interesting ways, to start. If it's an art product, then maybe work with a gallery abroad and have a showing. I think that would be a good way to start off. There are enough Indians all over the world, so it's always nice to have a link with somebody that go there and just explore the market, or help. Try to go directly rather than use too many middlemen, because you could get completely lost.
Initial collaboration is easier, because going out there on your own and starting off
definitely collaborations are better. There are also the the various Indian cultural institutes as well to be able to link up with. Museums are a good way as well to be able to reach out. So I mean, like for instance, there are in Singapore, there are some, there are various museums that you can write to. So having a kind of a community or a group showing actually sometimes works far better.
Okay, will 100 Hands arrange something like that?
I wish. Now, I hope, Srutika, with your broadcast, we are able to get some funding. We are happy to take whoever we can. But I hope, certainly I wouldn't say 2020, because it's the state at which everyone is functioning right now, but certainly 2021, I'm hopeful that we can certainly take some members, who are doing innovative work, to be able to link in with markets directly. Certainly.
So there's one question from Chanchal. Are there some names you can share? I think she's asking whether you any names you can share of outside connections, museums,
I think, everything. Yeah, you can Google any kind of cultural organizations. Indian cultural organizations, you get a long list actually.
Oh, okay. So you just search for Indian cultural organizations.
Yeah.
But do these organizations are open? Are they open to such type of collaborations?
I think some of them are. Yeah, some of them are. But I mean, obviously, each one has their own criteria on what, and it has to be traditional Indian craft. and you have to, and they will always give preference to, an artisan directly, or to a designer working on a particular craft rather than a more broad-based. So it needs to be craft related, not product related.
Okay. Okay. So it's not about
I think that's
it's basically
important.
some proper craft, and then you're making products
Yeah,
out
what's
of
the craft that you're taking, across,
Okay.
rather than just saying we are bringing some good-looking products,
Okay. Okay. So how do you reach out? Do you mail them, as in do they respond to me? Because I've noticed that all of these kind of organizations do not respond.
Yeah.
As in you can barge them with emails, you can barge them with calls, but it's very difficult to get some sort
I
of a
think
response.
doing it as a community is definitely something that is would make a larger impact.
Right. Yeah. If you go as a group, it becomes easier to
Yeah, as a
reach
group.
out.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I'll keep
absolutely.
this in mind, and I'm going to
Yes, absolutely.
ask you to get this up. So we have one more question. Can or should handmade product makers scale up? This is a very good question because scaling, because I said it should not be mass market, and it should not be also very small, because there has to be some sort of a balance. So what do you think will work, especially for
I think I think it's a good question. Also, I think in terms of scaling up, it's also to be able to teach the craft to a larger community, and then maybe you can become a craftpreneur in that sense, where you can actually then teach some of the local communities as well, and that's a good way to be able to sustain and to be able to scale up. Plus, you're actually generating employment. So rather than, like you said, not mass produced, but certainly scale is important. I mean, if you're going to do a round on exhibitions, you need to have a certain amount of product.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're going to have a very tough time. Yeah, it's not going to work out viable for you.
I know. So yeah, you need to have some minimum viable
Yeah,
product,
I think that's what we're trying to work with some of the members, to be able to teach them how to scale up from a business perspective. They need to be they need to understand some tenets of business. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So I think this brings us to the end of our conversation. I just had one question. What is the future of handmade? Post-COVID, what's the future of handmade?
We're always very optimistic about handmade. I think there is a big market for it. There is a lot of talk about slowing down in many ways. I think a lot of certainly the consumers who come in for all the 100-hand programs are very conscious about it. They want to know the process, and they're discerning. So like you said in the beginning, there is a future in handmade. We can't give shoddy stuff. We can't palm it off as handmade. We have to keep innovating. And also, I think in terms of scaling to a certain scale where it is viable to get your pricing right, I think that's critical. If an artisan is able to crack that, I think there's a great market for it. Certainly from a consumer perspective, I think people are definitely looking at handmade, no question about it.
Okay, that's a very optimistic answer, and
always optimistic.
I just hope it continues to stay this way. So thank you, Mala, so much for joining, and for
thank you so much,
conversation.
So this is the first time I've come on this live thing, so I'm also trying to peer and see how it all works. Great. Now you should be teaching rural artisans on what to do.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I was going to suggest. On 100.
Forget rural, even our urban members, you should be teaching.
We should all go live, and so that everybody also knows. The whole point of selling handmade also has to be about people knowing you. If people don't know you, they don't know what you're doing. They're not going to buy.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's one lesson I think everybody has to understand and learn. So thank you, Mala. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you. Bye. Okay. Thank you guys for joining us, and it has been good. Thank you for all your questions. Bye.
Okay. See you. Bye.